Hello everyone. Welcome to AzadRevengeStories channel. $25,000 to anyone who can replace Maeve within the next 3 months. I'll never forget how Thaddeus said it. So casual, like he was ordering lunch. The entire conference room went silent for 2 seconds before the laughter started. Not nervous laughter, real laughter at me. There I was standing at the front of our glass-walled conference room, halfway through my presentation on the Nexus project's database architecture, when my boss of 3 years interrupted me. I just highlighted a critical security protocol I'd implemented that had saved us from last month's ransomware attack that hit 3 of our competitors. I'm serious, Thaddeus continued, leaning back in his chair at the head of the table, running his hand through that salt and pepper hair he was so proud of. 25 grand bonus to whoever can learn everything Maeve does and make her redundant. I'm tired of her acting like she's irreplaceable. I stood frozen, clicker in hand, staring at the faces of my colleagues, people I'd worked alongside for years. Brennan from marketing covered his mouth but couldn't hide his smirk. Janelle from HR looked down, at least pretending to be uncomfortable. And Adisha, my closest ally on the development team, suddenly became fascinated with his notebook. Thaddeus, I'm in the middle of explaining the I started. We all know what you're explaining, Maeve. You're explaining why we should keep paying you 6 figures to do what any decent programmer could handle. Continue your presentation by all means. I just wanted to put the offer on the table. My throat closed up. My vision tunneled. I managed to click to the next slide, but I have no memory of what I said for the next 15 minutes. All I remember is the weight of 20 pairs of eyes, some pitying, most amused, all suddenly seeing me as a target with a price tag. That was the day everything changed. That was the day I decided Thaddeus Kingston would regret ever saying my name. Hey, sorry. I get emotional talking about this still. I'm Maeve Donovan, 34, and until 6 months ago, I was the lead database architect at a prominent financial technology company in Boston. I'd been there 5 years, built their security infrastructure from the ground up, and saved their sorry behinds more times than I could count. Before I go further with this story, and trust me, it gets so much worse before it gets better. If you're watching this, please hit like and subscribe to our channel. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and if you've ever been humiliated at work like this. Has your boss ever tried to replace you right to your face? I want to hear your stories too. The more we share these experiences, the less alone we all feel, right? Anyway, let me tell you about Thaddeus Kingston, the untouchable king of his little empire. He wasn't the CEO, he was the CTO, which somehow made it worse. He was technically my direct supervisor, but he knew less about actual coding than my 12-year-old niece. What he did know was how to take credit for other people's work, and how to charm the board members on the golf course. Thaddeus had been at the company since its founding. He was 48, divorced twice, lived in a penthouse downtown, and had a habit of touching women's shoulders when he talked to them. Nothing quite crossing the line enough to report, just enough to make your skin crawl. He'd hired me personally after seeing my work at a tech conference. And for the first 2 years, I was his golden girl. His words, not mine. Things changed when I refused to join him for dinner to discuss my career trajectory for the 3rd time. The invitation stopped. The praise and meetings turned to nitpicking. And then came the hiring of Elias Porter, a 27-year-old with half my experience, but twice my confidence, who Thaddeus immediately took under his wing. Still, I had job security. Or so I thought. I was the only one who truly understood the proprietary security system I'd built. It was my design, my architecture, my daily maintenance that kept our clients' financial data safe. The company managed over $8 billion in transactions annually through our platform. I knew every weakness, every patch, every workaround in the system, which is why that meeting blindsided me so completely. After my humiliation, I went straight to the bathroom and had what I can only describe as a panic attack in the 3rd stall. When I finally emerged, Janelle from HR was fixing her lipstick at the mirror. That was unprofessional of Thaddeus, she said, not looking at me. But between us, Maeve, you might want to start looking elsewhere. The board approved his proposal to streamline the tech department last week. My stomach dropped. Streamline? You know, I can't say more. She capped her lipstick. But I've known you 3 years. You deserve a heads up. I thanked her, went back to my desk, and stared at my monitor for an hour, unable to type a single line of code around me. I could feel the whispers, the glances. Who would be gunning for that $25,000? Probably all of them. Elias stopped by my desk at 5:30, hovering awkwardly. Hey, I was wondering if you could walk me through the Nexus database permissions again. I'm having trouble understanding the hierarchy. I looked up at him, 27, eager, wearing a button-down that still had creases from the package. 2 months ago, I would have spent an hour teaching him. Now I saw him for what he was, my potential replacement with a $25,000 price tag on his head. Check the documentation, I said. I wrote 80 pages on it last year. His face fell. Yeah, but I have a deadline. I lied. Sorry. After he left, I sat back in my chair and made a decision. I wasn't going down without a fight, but I also wasn't stupid. Thaddeus had the board's ear. If he wanted me gone, I was gone. It was just a matter of time. The question was, what would I do about it? That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, thinking about how the company had consumed 5 years of my life. How I'd canceled vacations for emergencies, worked weekends to meet deadlines, skipped my grandmother's funeral to finish the security audit they suddenly needed, and my reward, public humiliation, and a target on my back. I opened my laptop and started documenting everything, every piece of the system only I understood, every shortcut I'd created, every bug I'd quietly fixed without telling anyone. By morning, I had a 17-page document detailing exactly what would break if I disappeared. I also had a plan. The next day, I walked into the office with a smile. I stopped by Elias's desk. Hey, about yesterday. I'm sorry. I was upset about the meeting. If you still want help understanding the permission system, I can walk you through it. His face lit up. Really? That would be amazing. For the next 2 weeks, I became the most helpful, most transparent team member imaginable. I held informal training sessions. I updated documentation. I offered to do code reviews for junior developers. Everyone was confused by my sudden team spirit, but no one questioned it. They just thought I was trying to prove my worth. What I was actually doing was much more calculated. See, there's a difference between documenting a system and actually understanding it. I could write down every step of a process, but without the context, without knowing why each step matters. The documentation is just words on a page. So while I appeared to be sharing everything, I was carefully omitting the context, the connections, the why behind the how. I also started making subtle changes to the codebase. Nothing malicious, nothing that would cause immediate problems, just small tweaks that would make perfect sense to me, but would be confusing to anyone trying to reverse engineer my work. A variable name here, a comment there, breadcrumbs that led nowhere. Meanwhile, I was watching Thaddeus. He was already grooming Elias to take my place, extra meetings, lunches out of the office, the same shoulder touches he used to give me. Poor kid thought he was special. I almost felt sorry for him. 3 weeks after the meeting, Thaddeus called me into his office. His corner space had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, a desk that cost more than my car, and not a single family photo, just awards and a model of his boat. Maeve, he said, not looking up from his monitor as I sat down. I've noticed your renewed enthusiasm. Just doing my job, I said pleasantly. He finally looked at me, those cold blue eyes narrowing slightly. Elias tells me you've been very helpful. He's eager to learn. I respect that. Thaddeus leaned back, studying me. Let's be direct with each other. You know, the company is evolving. The board wants more efficiency, less reliance on individual contributors. You mean they want cheaper labor that's easier to control? I said, still smiling. His jaw tightened. I'm offering you a dignified exit, 6 months severance if you train your replacement, specifically Elias, and leave quietly. There it was, my suspicions confirmed. And if I don't, then you force my hand into documenting performance issues, which would result in termination without severance. He shrugged. Your choice. But I thought you'd appreciate the courtesy of options. I took a deep breath. When would this transition begin? Immediately. The Nexus project launches in 3 months. We need Elias fully up to speed by then. The Nexus project, the company's biggest initiative to date, a complete overhaul of our platform that would handle direct integration with three major financial institutions. 8 million in development costs, already with projected annual revenue of 30 million. Database architecture was the foundation of the entire project. I see, I said quietly. And the $25,000 bonus, is that still on the table for Elias? Ed smiled thinly. Concerned about your replacement's compensation, just curious about how much I'm worth to replace. He looked back at his screen, dismissing me. I'll have HR prepare the severance agreement. In the meantime, I expect your full cooperation with Elias. I stood up. Of course, anything for the company. As I turned to leave, he added, and Maeve, this stays between us until the transition is complete. I don't want the team distracted. Translation. He didn't want anyone knowing he was forcing me out until it was too late for me to gather allies. Understood, I said, and walked out, my mind racing with the next phase of my plan. That afternoon, I approached Elias. How about I show you the core Nexus architecture tomorrow, the parts that aren't in the documentation yet? His eyes widened. That would be incredible. Thank you, Maeve. Don't thank me, I said. We're a team, right? The next day, I began Elias's special training. I showed him a modified version of the database structure, one that looked correct on the surface, but had subtle critical differences. I introduced complexities that didn't need to be there. I created phantom dependencies, and throughout it all, I emphasized how important it was to follow my exact methodology. The system is delicate. I told him one wrong query, and you could corrupt the entire financial ledger. He took frantic notes, nodding seriously, never questioning why things were built the way I described. Meanwhile, I was documenting everything differently in the official repository, creating a discrepancy between what I was telling Elias and what was in the system documentation. Adithya, my old ally who had abandoned me in the meeting, caught me after one of these sessions. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly as we waited for the elevator. "Training my replacement, apparently," I said. He glanced around to make sure we were alone. "I've reviewed your recent commits. The documentation doesn't match what I've heard you telling Elias." I met his eyes. "Maybe you misheard." The elevator arrived, and we stepped in. "Maeve, if you're setting him up to fail, I'm doing exactly what Thaddeus asked," I interrupted, making myself replaceable. Anisha looked troubled. "The Nexus launch can't afford mistakes. There's too much writing on it." Then maybe Thaddeus should have thought of that before putting a price tag on my head. The elevator doors opened on our floor, and I walked out first, leaving Anisha standing there. I felt a twinge of guilt. Aditya wasn't my enemy, but he also hadn't stood up for me when it mattered. Over the next few weeks, I continued my careful campaign. During the day, I was the model employee, helpful, transparent, dedicated. I trained Elias. I attended every meeting. I hit every deadline. At night, I documented the real system architecture in detail, saving it all to my personal drive. I also updated my resume and quietly reached out to contacts at other companies. 6 weeks after the initial meeting, Thaddeus announced a project update session. The entire Nexus team gathered in the main conference room. Thaddeus stood at the front, confident as ever. "We are halfway to launch, and I'm pleased to say we are on schedule and under budget," he announced. "I'd like to recognize a few key contributors who are making this possible." He went through a list of names, acknowledging their work. My name wasn't mentioned once, despite the fact that the entire data structure was my design. And finally, I'd like to recognize Elias Porter, who has stepped up to take ownership of the database architecture. Elias, why don't you give us a quick overview of the security implementation? Elias stood surprised, but eager. Of course. Thanks to Maeve's training, I've gotten familiar with the underlying structure. He launched into an explanation that mixed correct information with the falsities I'd fed him. I watched the faces of the senior developers as they registered confusion, but said nothing. Thaddeus nodded approvingly, oblivious to the technical inconsistencies. When Elias finished, Thaddeus clapped him on the shoulder. "Excellent work. I think we found our new database lead." The implication was clear to everyone in the room. I was being replaced, and Elias was the chosen one. After the meeting, I returned to my desk to find an email from HR. The subject line, Transition Agreement. Attached was my severance package, offering 6 months' pay in exchange for a smooth handover and a non-disparagement clause. The end date was set for exactly 1 week before the Nexus launched. They wanted me gone before the project went live, but not so soon that I couldn't finish training Elias. They wanted to squeeze every last drop of knowledge from me, then discard me before I could see my work implemented. I printed the agreement, signed it, and walked it directly to Janelle in HR. That was fast, she said, surprised. I shrugged. What choice do I have? You could fight it, she suggested quietly, against Thaddeus. We both know how that would end. She took the agreement, looking uncomfortable. For what it's worth, I think this is a mistake. No one understands the Nexus architecture like you do. I guess we'll find out if that matters, I said. That night, I made a final decision. I'd been wavering between two paths: actively sabotage the project or simply allow it to fail on its own due to Elias's incomplete understanding. The first would be deeply satisfying, but potentially illegal. The second would be cleaner, but less certain. In the end, I chose a third path, one that would require perfect timing and a deep understanding of how Thaddeus and the company operated. I spent the next month completing Elias's training, but with a crucial modification. Instead of teaching him falsehoods, I now taught him genuine procedures, but left out a single critical element. One that wouldn't be apparent until the system was under full load. One that I alone understood because I'd built it specifically to address a vulnerability I discovered last year. 2 weeks before my scheduled departure, I requested a meeting with Thaddeus. He seemed annoyed by the interruption to his day. What is it, Maeve? I have a board call in 20 minutes. I want to discuss my role in the Nexus launch, I said. He sighed. We've been over this. Your transition ends the week before launch. Elias will handle any issues that arise. That's actually what I wanted to talk about. There's a particular load balancing issue that only appears under stress. If the system gets hit with too many simultaneous transactions, Maeve, Thaddeus interrupted, holding up his hand. We've spent millions developing this system. The team has run every possible stress test. If there were load balancing issues, they would have surfaced. Not this one, I insisted. It only appears when the transaction volume exceeds 10,000 per minute with parallel authentication requests. Our test environment can't simulate that kind of traffic. He checked his watch impatiently. Write up your concerns and send them to Elias. That's his department now. I've tried. He doesn't understand and then explain it better. Thaddeus snapped. That's what we're paying you for, isn't it? For these final 2 weeks anyway. I took a deep breath. What if I stayed through the launch just as a precaution? No extra pay, just to ensure everything goes smoothly. Thaddeus leaned back, studying me with those calculating eyes. Now, why would you offer that after all this unpleasantness? Because despite everything, I don't want to see 5 years of my work crash and burn. He actually laughed. Your concern is noted, but unnecessary. Elias has assured me he's fully comfortable with the system now. Elias doesn't know what he doesn't know, I said quietly. That will be all, Maeve. He turned back to his monitor, dismissing me. I stood up slowly. For the record, I tried to warn you. He didn't even look up. I walked out of his office feeling a strange mix of emotions. Anger certainly, but also an odd sense of calm. I'd given him a chance to avoid what was coming. He'd made his choice. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. I completed all my transition documentation, handed over access credentials, and trained Elias on every aspect of the system except the one critical component I'd mentioned to Thaddeus. No one asked about it again. No one seemed concerned. On my last day, there was no party, no card passed around for signatures. Janelle from HR met me at 4:30 to collect my badge and laptop. A few team members stopped by awkwardly to say goodbye. Editor lingered the longest. This isn't right, he said quietly, the way they are pushing you out. I shrugged, packing the few personal items from my desk. Companies replace people all the time. Not people like you. He hesitated. Maeve, about the Nexus architecture. There's something not adding up in the documentation. The transaction verification pathway seems incomplete. I met his eyes. I guess Elias will have to figure that out. If something goes wrong at launch, then I guess Thaddeus will have to explain to the board why he paid $25,000 to replace the one person who could have prevented it. I finished for him. Adair looked troubled. That's not it's exactly what's happening. I closed my bag. Goodbye, Adair. Good luck with the launch. As Janelle escorted me to the elevator, I took one last look at the office where I'd spent countless hours, weekends, holidays. Thaddeus's corner office was dark. He hadn't even bothered to be present for my departure. I really am sorry about how this played out, Janelle said as the elevator doors closed. Don't be, I replied. Everything happens for a reason. The week after my departure was quiet. I took long walks, caught up on sleep, and interviewed at 3 different companies. I didn't check my work email. It had already been deactivated, and I resisted the urge to reach out to former colleagues. I wanted clean separation. I needed it for what came next. 6 days after I left, my phone rang at 11:30 at night. The caller ID showed Adair's name. Hello, I answered, already knowing why he was calling. Maeve. His voice was tight with stress. We have a problem with Nexus, a big one. I'm not employed there anymore, I reminded him. The pre-launch testing just crashed the entire transaction verification system. Nothing's going through. Elias has been trying to fix it for hours, but he's just making it worse. That is losing his mind. I sat up in bed switching on my lap. What exactly is happening? Transaction bottleneck. The system accepts the requests but then freezes during verification. Exactly what you warned Thaddeus about, isn't it? I didn't answer directly. What does Thaddeus want? He doesn't know I'm calling you, Adair admitted. He's insisting I can fix it, but the launch is in 5 days and our biggest clients are expecting demos tomorrow. If we can't process transactions by morning, then the $8 million project crashes before it even launches. I finished for him and the $30 million in projected annual revenue vanishes. Please, Maeve, I know they treated you terribly, but the whole team's jobs could be at stake if this fails. I closed my eyes, considering my options. This was exactly what I'd anticipated, what I'd planned for, really. But hearing the panic in Aditya's voice made it real in a way my imagination hadn't captured. I'll think about it, I said finally. That's all I can promise right now. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and pulled up the detailed documentation I'd saved. The real architecture, not the simplified version I'd left behind. The fix was relatively simple. If you understood the underlying structure I'd built, it would take me 20 minutes tops. But that wasn't the point. The next morning at 7:30, I received another call, this time from an unfamiliar number. Maeve Donovan, I answered. Miss Donovan, this is Gregory Harlow, chairman of the board at your former employer. I sat up straighter. I knew the name, of course, but I'd never spoken directly to him before. What can I do for you, Mr. Harlow? I understand there's an issue with the Nexus project, he said, his voice grave. An issue that Thaddeus Kingston tells me only you can resolve. Is that what Thaddeus says? I couldn't help the slight smile that formed. He was reluctant to admit it. Harlow acknowledged, but the situation is dire. We have major clients arriving for demonstrations today, and the system is non-functional. That sounds serious. M. Donovan, Harlow said, his tone shifting from grave to almost pleading. I'm authorized to offer you a consulting fee of $50,000 to come in today and resolve this issue. Whatever your feelings about your departure, surely we can. Mr. Harlow, I interrupted gently. I don't think you understand the situation. Thaddeus didn't just fire me. He humiliated me in front of my colleagues. He offered a bounty for my replacement. He dismantled 5 years of my career because I wouldn't go to dinner with him. There was a long pause on the line. I was not aware of those details. Harlow finally said, I'm sure you weren't. Thaddeus is very careful about what information reaches the board. Another pause. What would it take for you to help us, Miss Donovan? Name your price. I took a deep breath. I don't want money, Mr. Harlow. I want 3 things. First, I want a public acknowledgement of my work on the Nexus project. Second, I want Thaddeus Kingston to personally apologize to me in front of the same team that witnessed my humiliation. And third, I want the board to launch a full investigation into Thaddeus's management practices, particularly his treatment of female employees. The first two are easily arranged, Harlow said cautiously. The third is more complicated. Then I guess Thaddeus will have to explain to your clients why an $8 million project failed because he paid someone $25,000 to replace me. I could practically hear Harlow's mind racing, calculating the costs, the risks, the optics. Come to the office at 10:00 a.m. He finally said, "You will have your acknowledgement and apology, and I give you my word that the board will take your concerns about Thaddeus seriously." "I'll be there," I said, and ended the call. At 9:58 a.m., I walked into the lobby of my former workplace. The receptionist's eyes widened when she saw me. "Miss Donovan, they are waiting for you in the main conference room." As I rode the elevator up, I felt strangely calm. This moment, this exact scenario, was what I'd been working toward for months. Not sabotage, not vindictive destruction, but this, the recognition of my value, the exposure of Thaddeus's behavior, and the reclaiming of my professional dignity. The conference room doors were closed when I arrived. I knocked once and entered to find an extraordinary scene. The entire Nexus team was seated around the table along with Gregory Harlow and two other board members I recognized. At the far end, looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight, sat Thaddeus. His normally immaculate appearance was disheveled, tie askew, hair uncombed, dark circles under his eyes. Elias was there, too, his expression a mix of desperation and embarrassment. Harlow stood as I entered. "Miss Donovan, thank you for coming. As agreed, before we proceed, Thaddeus has something to say." All eyes turned to Thaddeus, who remained seated, jaw clenched. "Thaddeus," Harlow prompted, his voice hard. Slowly, Thaddeus rose to his feet. "Maeve," he began, his voice rough, "it appears I underestimated your contribution to the Nexus project." "That's not an apology," Harlow said sharply. Thaddeus's face flushed dark red. "I apologize for the manner in which your transition was handled. It was unprofessional of me." I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each team member who had laughed that day, who had coveted the bounty on my position, who had stayed silent as I was pushed out. "Thank you, Thaddeus. But that's not quite accurate, is it?" I said quietly. "You didn't handle my transition unprofessionally. You deliberately humiliated me in this very room by placing a $25,000 bounty on my job. You undermined me for months because I wouldn't have dinner with you, and you discarded me a week before launch because you thought Elias could do my job." The room was utterly silent. Several people looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "So I'll accept your apology," I continued. "When you apologize for what you actually did," that looked to Harlow, who nodded grimly. "I apologize for humiliating you," Thaddeus managed, each word seeming to physically pain him, "for undermining you and for other inappropriate behavior." "Miss Donovan," Harlow interjected, "I want to officially acknowledge your crucial role in developing the Nexus architecture. The board recognizes that this project would not exist without your expertise, and I assure you we will be conducting a thorough review of management practices starting immediately." I nodded, accepting this. "Then let's fix your system." The relief in the room was palpable. Elias quickly pulled up the codebase, showing me where they'd been struggling. Just as I'd anticipated, the transaction verification pathway was collapsing under load testing because they hadn't implemented the dynamic routing protocol I'd designed specifically for high-volume periods. I explained the issue, watching understanding dawn on the faces of the senior developers. This wasn't sabotage. It was simply a feature so integral to the system that I hadn't needed to document it separately. It was woven into the architecture itself, visible only if you understood the whole. It took 40 minutes to implement the fix, test it, and confirm that transactions were flowing normally again. As the team watched the successful test results roll in, there was a smattering of applause. "It works," Elias said, sounding both relieved and deflated. "It always worked," I corrected gently. "You just didn't understand how." Harlow approached as the team began dispersing. "That was remarkable. Miss Donovan, the board would like to discuss your potential return to the company, perhaps in a more senior role." I smiled. "That's generous, Mr. Harlow, but I've already accepted a position elsewhere, a company that values my contributions from the start." His face fell slightly. "I understand. May I ask where?" "One of your competitors," I said simply. "I start next week as their Chief Information Security Officer." Harlow's eyebrows rose. "That's quite a step up." "Yes, it is. Sometimes being undervalued in one place helps you find your true worth elsewhere." As we spoke, I noticed Thaddeus slipping out of the conference room, avoiding eye contact with everyone. "What will happen to Thaddeus?" I asked. Harlow's expression hardened. "That's a board matter, but I can tell you that his future with the company is being reevaluated as we speak. The $25,000 bounty situation alone represents a serious lapse in judgment. And if there are additional complaints about his behavior, there will be," I assured him, "now that people see he's not untouchable." And I was right. Over the next week, 3 women and 1 man came forward with complaints about Thaddeus's behavior. 2 weeks later, the company announced his resignation to pursue other opportunities. The press release thanked him for his years of service, but made no mention of the circumstances. The Nexus project launched successfully on schedule, processing over 15,000 transactions per minute without a hitch. My name was included in the official announcement as the architectural visionary behind the system. As for Elias, he reached out to me a month later, apologizing for his role in what happened. He hadn't understood he was being used as a weapon against me. I believed him. He was young, ambitious, and manipulated by a master. I ended up recommending him for a position at another company where he could grow without Thaddeus's toxic influence. My new role as CISO came with double my previous salary, equity in the company, and a team of my own to manage. Within 6 months, we launched a security protocol that captured significant market share from my former employer. I still see some of my old colleagues occasionally. Adisha and I meet for coffee every few weeks. He tells me the culture has improved dramatically since Thaddeus left. Janelle from HR was promoted to director and has implemented new policies against workplace harassment, and the $25,000 that would have gone to my replacement. The company donated it to a nonprofit supporting women in technology. Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. Sometimes it's about forcing the truth into the light and letting it do the work for you. I didn't destroy Thaddeus. His own actions did that once they were exposed. I didn't sabotage the Nexus project. I built it so well that only I could fully understand it. And in the end, I didn't just survive being discarded. I thrived because of it. The lesson I learned: know your value, document everything, and when someone treats you as disposable, don't waste energy on anger. Channel it into becoming truly irreplaceable somewhere else. If you're watching this and you're in a situation where you're being undervalued or mistreated, remember, your knowledge is power. Your skills are currency. And sometimes the best revenge is simply showing everyone exactly what they lost when they lost you. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated at work? Did you find a way to prove your worth? Or are you still waiting for your moment? Subscribe to our channel for more real stories like mine, and hit that like button if this resonated with you. I read every comment, and I promise you're not alone in these experiences. Sometimes sharing them is the first step toward your own vindication. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, you're never as replaceable as they want you to believe. I invite you to subscribe to the Azad Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and support me further by hitting the hype button so the story in this video can be heard by many more people. Thanks to all.